Thus Venerable Ajaan used to say, Dhamma is to be found where death is close by. If one has not been faced with death, one has not seen Dhamma. This is because to risk one's life and sanity by truly facing death with a heart that is unshakably intent on the Dhamma of deliverance is the principle which is upheld by those Gammatana bhikkhus who are determined to practice the way in a true and genuine manner. Therefore they are likely to meet with insufficiency of food and poverty of possessions all the time while they are striving for Dhamma. But their hearts will be fully contented with Dhamma, for they have peace and brightness where the heart abides, without any external involvement and turbulence.
Chapter 10. The Practice of the Dhutangas. The 13 Dhutanga observances are necessary forms of Dhamma for the kind of bhikkhus as described in the last chapters, and they are an essential part of the way of life of those whose aim is to progress towards the path, fruition, and nibbana. This is no different from the way in which the Dhutanga observances were necessary forms of Dhamma for the bhikkhus at the time of the Lord Buddha. Some bhikkhus like to live under the shade of a tree in the dry season, until their mosquito nets and cloths go all moldy and discolored after becoming wet by the dew every night in their exposed, unprotected position. For in the cold season the dew is very heavy, and the mosquito nets and cloths become completely soaked every night. In the morning they must lay everything out to dry in the sun every day, but even so they still go moldy. Wherever the mold grows in the cloth, it makes a small black spot which cannot be washed out and remains there until the cloth is destroyed. But no way has been found to prevent fungus molds from becoming established in cloth which is out in the open for a long time, becoming saturated with dew every night and drying before it can be put in the sun to dry. These bhikkhus also do the practice of walking jangama in a true and genuine manner so that they can attain calm and happiness from it. Each time they do it, they may go on for 3 to 5 hours until they feel genuinely tired. Then they stop walking jangama and go and sit in meditation practice for several hours, after which they stop and rest. Those who resolutely practice the Dhutanga Kammartanas while being completely committed to them will see the value of each Dhutanga practice and how much benefit they can attain from them. For each Dhutanga is a means of assisting those who practice them to reach the higher levels of Dhamma step by step. Not one of them is ever an obstacle in the ways of the path, fruition, and nibbana. They are all forms of Dhamma as the means of training those who practice to become courageous and full of cheer in Dhamma, and also to become warriors who fight in every way that weakens and drives the kilesas from their hearts. Those who have only lived in houses or buildings and have never gone out to the forest are not likely to have seen the kinds of things that happen in the forest. They have probably seen only the things that happen where people live in houses, which are ordinary kinds of things which all of us have come across and which we are all quite familiar with. But it is also likely that they never think in such a way as to see what disadvantages come from these kinds of things, and how they may extricate themselves and go free from them. Day by day, they are bound to run into the same things that they have met in the past, and they get the dukkha that comes from them every hour of every day without exception, but they have no interest in searching for the reason why, even only to the extent of being able to avoid them. To live in the forest in the right way, which accords with the true purpose of the Dhutangas, a person must be a warrior, a fighter, in order to extricate himself truly from the various obstacles which are in his own heart. He does not merely live there like an animal in the forest, which has always lived there and is completely familiar with the forest life, but he lives there for the purpose of examining things which are within himself and which arise in various circumstances, with Dhamma as his ultimate goal. Of all the enemies to his life in the forest, the greatest is likely to be fear. This type of kilesa is an obstacle which makes the heart sink down, so that it no longer wants to stay in the forest. When he understands that this kilesa is an obstacle barring his way forward towards the path and fruition, he must clear it away and drive it out from his heart until it is entirely eradicated, and there remains only bravery and courage. Then he will be able to go anywhere, live anywhere, and lie down anywhere without fear of death, which is yet another type of kilesa, and he will see clearly in his own experience just how valuable and how important this Dhutanga is. This is why the Lord Buddha prescribed the Dhutanga of living in the forest as a routine practice. But apart from this, living in the forest is also valuable insofar as one has no distractions and involvements with all those things that one associates with. Things which, generally speaking, tend to depress the heart and bury it so that it goes right down, giving it no chance to recover and emerge for it to be able to be its own master even for a few moments at a time. Admiring the natural scenery in various places in the forest where one is staying is not the sort of thing that disturbs and upsets the heart, causing it to be agitated and confused, as do those things which arouse one's thoughts and imagination, which are just waiting to put one to sleep as soon as one is invaded by any one of these many kinds of things. The more one is invaded by these things by day and night, all the time, the more difficult it is to say how long one would be able to stand up to it, and how many times, before becoming unconscious and falling down, due to the various poisons which one is inhaling all the time from those things. Those bhikkhus who think about the Dhutangas and examine them to see the purpose behind them, whatever understanding they gain, they will see the value of the Dhutanga of living in the forest, to the extent of their understanding. Because this Dhutanga Dhamma is a beautiful adornment which has always decorated the sasana in the most wonderful way, and amongst those Buddhists who maintain it and do not give it up, nor let it degenerate, there is no sadness or lack of cheerfulness. This Dhutanga will also adorn the bhikkhus who continue to uphold it, making them into a soparnasankha in the Dhamma and Vinaya, which gives them no cause for adverse criticism whether externally or internally. The Forest University. Places such as forests, hills, caves, overhanging cliffs, charnel grounds, jungle, and remote hill forests, where the natural environment remains undisturbed far away from any villages, are the places which bring mindfulness, wisdom, knowledge, and skill to the bhikkhu whose interest is in Dhamma, with the aim of attaining freedom for himself. Such a bhikkhu does not like the distraction and turmoil associated with anything which is an obstacle, an enemy, hindering his progress towards freedom from dukkha. In Buddhism, such places have always been favored, right from the beginning, when the Lord Buddha was the courageous leader, undaunted in the face of death, who practiced for his own development in such places, before he became fully enlightened in the highest Dhamma, and then went out to teach those who were fit to receive the teaching. All the Savakas who heard the Dhamma teaching and learnt from the Lord about those places which were suitable for them, variously went off and practiced the way. They followed in the footsteps of the Buddha until mindfulness, wisdom, and skillfulness arose, which were equal to the internal tricks of the kilesas which had deceived them and led them down to hell in past lives both short and long throughout countless ages. Then they shook off and entirely got rid of all that was filthy and loathsome in their hearts, and this they did in this forest, or on that hill, or in a cave over there, or under an overhanging cliff in that district, in a charnel ground, a deserted house, or under the shade of a tree while living in a remote district in this forest or that hill. These are the places where Dhamma was planted and cultivated in the hearts of those who practiced the way, giving them an unshakable root principle within them, and this has continued right up to the present day. If one compares this with modern institutions, it is analogous to those large and well-known universities where students may work for their bachelor's, master's, and doctor's degrees, or whatever other scholarly distinctions there are, so that those students who are interested in learning all that they need to know to finish the course may return home and be of value in developing their own country and people. All of the above places were considered important at the time of the Lord Buddha, and since then throughout the ages, right up to the present for the students practicing Dhamma at various levels of development. In these places they did everything to the utmost of their mindfulness and strength in the various stages of skill which they should aim for and attain in such a forest university. In other words, they attained their degrees at their various levels of development, until they reached the topmost level. The levels of Dhamma which they learnt and practiced in those places, which we have likened to a university, are those of the path and fruition of Sotapanna, the path and fruition of Sakadagami, the path and fruition of Anagami, and the path and fruition of Arahant with, at the same moment, the attainment of the one Nibbana. At this final stage, the student becomes a great master, because whoever reaches this final stage is a perfect field of merit, both to himself and for others, and there is no grade of learning which is higher than this throughout the threefold universe. So as to accord with the world, which has always been a pair with Dhamma, the forest hills, jungle, and other such places may be called the University of the Great Master, the Lord Buddha, the founder of the religion. The Lord prescribed such places right from the beginning when he first formulated our religion by his teaching, which he bestowed on the bhikkhus and others from that time on with such brief injunctions as Rukkamula Senasana, dwelling at the foot of a tree. Afterwards he gradually increased the number of Dhutangas up to 13, which also includes the Rukkamula Senasana Dhutanga. These universities are where the bhikkhus at the time of the Lord Buddha liked to stay, to learn and practice the way truly and to their utmost, with complete dedication until they attained the first, second, and third grades, and finally the fourth, which was their master's degree. Then they brought the pure and true Dhamma to their associates, and taught in place of the Lord, the great teacher, so as to lighten his burden to some extent. So Buddhism developed and prospered and spread out to countless numbers of people, because it relied upon the university of forests and hills, and other such places which were so favorable. For they proved to be of the greatest value, both to the great teacher and to all his Savaka followers who reached the final stage of learning. They became masters to whom the world bowed in homage as their ideal, both in behavior and in what concerns the heart. This has continued through the ages right down to us who are here now, and who uphold them as the guiding line of our lives and hearts and practice the way following their example, enough to know the significance of being a person at a level of what is generally accepted as that of a genuine human being. When we think of the Dhutanga observances and make comparisons with the places where universities should be established, what course of study should be provided, and what syllabus should these universities in the world have? A good guide may be found in the 13 Dhutanga observances and the 14 Khanda observances as taught in Buddhism. These can give an indication of a suitable location to set up the university, and the basic principles of such a Buddhist university. Thus, some of the Dhutangas give a good indication of the kind of places that would be suitable for their practice, such as the injunctions to live in the forest, to stay under the shade of a tree, to live in a charnel ground, to visit a charnel ground, to accept whatever place to stay is arranged by other people, to live out in the open without any shelter, and to live in any other appropriate and suitable place, such as a cave, an overhanging cliff, or an empty building where nobody is staying. As for getting some indication of the principles of the curriculum, which is the way of practice, in such a university, the Sangha is able to give some help in this regard. Thus the students should keep the observances of using only cloth from the charnel ground, having only the 3 robes as their clothing, relying only on Paṭipadā food, eating only out of the bowl, eating food only once a day, refusing food given after Paṭipadā, and not lying down to sleep for any set number of nights. In addition, there are the 40 kammartanas, which are the basis of the way of meditation practice, which also give assistance in this curriculum in conjunction with the Dhutangas. In summary, Buddhism is a religion that is complete with many branches of knowledge, and it has acted as a university ever since the time that the great teacher started teaching Dhamma to the world. There are many places where this university is established, and there are many forms of learning which are available, which the students may choose to take up and learn and practice. Those places which the Lord Buddha recommended as being the foremost, the most important, and the highest branch of the university are the forest, the shade of a tree, a charnel ground, and living out in the open. In addition, there are other special places, including a cave, an overhanging cliff, the top or sides of a hill, a valley, and the edge of the forest or hills, all of which are also to be considered as special places which are recommended in the same way by the Lord. The principles of training as used by this university in the various courses that are offered are based on the practice of the various Dhutanga observances which are to be kept up all the time in all situations, as we have already described herein. In other words, the practices of using only discarded cloth obtained from the charnel ground, using only the 3 robes, going on Paṭipadā every day as an observance, eating only from the bowl, eating only once a day, and in addition the 40 kammartanas such as, for example, the practice of anapanasati, which will be discussed further on, are forms of learning which will not lead to disappointment in those who variously practice them, for they lead to the attainment of the third, second, first, and the master's degrees. These are the titles given to the performance of those students who have had the interest and the commitment to follow the course through in all its parts at the level of the degree that they work to attain. The place where this university is located is very extensive and is not crowded and constricted, as are the universities where the world goes to get their learning. The number of students can be very large, including both men and women, monks and lay people of all nationalities, race, and color, regardless of class, age, or educational background. It is open and accepts students in all seasons, every day of the week, and at all times of the day or night. In fact, it is always open and has been so ever since it was founded almost 2,600 years ago by the Lord Buddha, who was the first professor to teach in it. From the beginning, he accepted students and taught them from the most elementary levels up to the level of the Master Chitta, which is Dhamma throughout. The students of the Lord Buddha are of 4 types, these being bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas, and upasikas. But as there are no bhikkhunis left now, we may put samaneras in their place. The first students to graduate from the university were the Panchavaggiya, the first 5, of whom Venerable Anya Kondanya was the first. The second group included Venerable Yasagulaputta and 60 friends of his. The third group was composed of the 3 Jatila brothers who were teachers and all their followers, altogether making up 1,003 bhikkhus. All the members of these 3 groups attained the completion of their learning and training from the principles of the course of training, vidya, in freedom, vimutti, in various places in this university, and they all became masters. These were the assistant professors under the Lord Buddha, who were also called the Savaka Arahants. They helped to teach other people, thereby taking on some of the burden of teaching and reducing the load that the Lord was carrying. Their reward was the result of their work, which their followers gained to a greater or lesser extent, and they looked on this as being sufficient reward, taking into account the metta which they had for them. If we consider the value that they got from this in terms of worldly things, then each of them received 30 bowls of food per month equally, from the Lord down to the smallest samanera, which is a very good example of equal treatment. It is not easy to find such kindness to equal that of the great masters, who always have metta for the world, which never diminishes or dulls. Therefore, we who are Buddhists can confidently assert that the university and its various courses of instruction which belong to Buddhism, as founded and formed by the Lord Buddha, and where he himself taught and directed all the Savaka Arahants, so that they then went out to teach in his place, is the foremost university and the foremost teaching in the world, and there is no other teaching to equal it in the universe. Even the Devaputtas, the Devatas, Indra, Brahma, Yama, the Yaksas, the Nagas, and the Garudas all still pay homage and reverence to the Lord, and accept him as the foremost teacher and the greatest master in the universe, as in the often repeated verse in praise of the Buddha, Ta Deva Manussanam. Even with the Lord Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, his enlightenment arose in the midst of this university, as well as all of his knowledge of the way to attain freedom, vidya-vimutti, which has already been mentioned above. This is why he praised and extolled the virtues of those forest institutes in his religion. When a worthy man was ordained as a bhikkhu, the Lord taught him the 5 Gammartanas and the Anusasana, instructions as to the mode of living, such as dwelling under the shade of a tree, to act as a pointer to show the general way of practice and some of the things which they should do. These are also the means of cutting down the thick, tangled forest with persistence. In other words, the various kinds of kilesas in the heart which enclose it and prevent it from seeing the path leading to the path fruition and nibbana, and clearing the place with the Dhamma weapons which the Lord provided. But when Samaneras were ordained, he only taught them the 5 Gammartanas to fight against the various vicious maras, to destroy them and clear them from the heart. He did not teach them the Anusasanas concerned with living in the forests and hills, probably because they were still too young for this. So he did not send them out into the front line of battle, which was not yet necessary for them. In the time of the Lord Buddha, the number of people who became Savaka Arahants was very great, and nearly all of them attained enlightenment from the forest institutes which we have discussed. The Lord Buddha and all the Sawakas graduated in Dhamma from the hills and forests where they gained their master's degrees. The courses of training which they completed in this university were concerned with liberation, vimutti. So when they went out to teach the world, it was a subject which they could be absolutely sure about and in which they had full confidence. There was nothing which was modified, false, or ambiguous in it, both in regard to those worthy ones who had fully attained to it, as well as the knowledge of it in which they were fully proficient. This is very different from the knowledge and the students which are found everywhere else in the world, but the Sangha University which we have described has difficulty in finding students who want to learn. This may be because this institute gives more authority to each student to look after himself than it gives to anyone else to look after him and direct him and govern him in the way that they do in the world's universities. In other words, to enter, to stay, and to train in any of this institute's places or branches is for the student to choose and decide as he likes. In a similar way, amongst the various subjects and courses of training which are available in this institute, each individual has the right to choose those which he finds suitable to himself. Both the acharyas and the student are chosen by himself, and if his acharya, who is himself, is strict and resourceful in training his follower, for both the acharya and the pupil are in one and the same person, driving himself on with skill, then both will steadily progress towards a state of calm and happiness. Then, even if he should go into a forest which is full of all sorts of wild animals and tigers, he has no fear and can stay there calmly, relaxed, peaceful and happily enjoying the noises made by all the animals which serenade the forest with their music, each in its own characteristic way, to which he can listen with absorbed attention. This does not cause one to lose one's wealth like man-made music, which penetrates deeply and catches the heart. If one's heart is still excitable, only waiting to emerge and put its head out to get some fresh air, it may be blown away by the storm of music and scattered about in an uncontrolled manner, which is most unseemly. This can also spoil oneself and that which is of value to one, leading to loss of restraint and loss in a very real way. On the other hand, the music of the forest animals is a soothing lullaby which they each sing at their own time, and the sound makes one become pleasantly absorbed in listening to it with a sympathy that touches the heart. But wherever a Gammatana bhikkhu goes to stay, all sorts of animals, two-legged, four-legged, winged, and without wings, tend to gather round in his vicinity, and the longer he stays there, the more seem to come. At times the sound of them calling to their friends who are all about the place, in their own animal languages, resounds loudly through the forest, and this is the same sort of thing as happens with us human beings. For all beings who have hearts naturally think of each other, but they are not able to speak human languages to let us know about themselves, although each species has its own inherent language which derives from its birth and upbringing, as also do people. Their calls and the noises they make to each other are what the bhikkhus call music, and it goes on all the time. In the morning one type of animal will make its call, later in the morning another species will start up, then in the afternoon yet others will call out to each other, and so it goes on throughout the day and night. It is almost as if they work in shifts, one taking over when the previous one finishes. Although in fact they are probably like the chickens which people keep around their homes, which just crow at that time which is natural to them. But in the forests there are many kinds of animals, each kind having a different time for wandering about searching for food and making their characteristic calls and cries, and never are they all silent, even at night, when many species search for food as others do by day. Therefore their cries and calls never cease throughout the 24 hours of the day. Living and training in the subject of Dhamma, in accordance with the policy and way of Buddhism, in the institutions that we have described above, is far more difficult than the way of learning from textbooks. But if one can put up with the difficulties of this way of learning and practice, and if one gets the results, they will be great results, one will have great merit, and one will know clearly in one's own heart the value of striving persistently to the limit of one's endurance. Anyone who is not as resolute and bold as a true warrior is not likely to be able to stay there, because it is rather like being in a reformatory the whole time, even though there is nobody there to force or intimidate one, apart that is from the volition due to anxiety about what one will become in the future, which compels one from within oneself to go on. When one has oneself done the work of training in Buddhism in the foregoing way until one has seen the awesome power of the hardships and tormenting conditions in everything of all kinds, then one will be able to realize fully how proficient and courageous the Buddha and his noble disciples were, and one will see how their lineage was truly that of skilled warriors. The business of getting rid of all one's doubts and uncertainties entirely, in such a way that one knows and sees quite clearly for oneself, means that other people have fear, but if one has not yet experienced fear of that kind, one will not yet appreciate that there is anything special about it that should make one think much of it. Other people have suffering, dukkha, but if one has not experienced suffering such as that, one will not appreciate that there is anything special about it which should make one think. Others discipline themselves in their various ways of striving to develop, which involves much dukkha and difficulty, but if one has not experienced this kind of discipline and dukkha for oneself, one will not appreciate that there is anything special about it which should make one think. There is suffering and torment which comes from various causes and which arises out of the strenuous trainings undertaken by other people, but if one has not yet experienced these things for oneself, one will not appreciate that there is anything special about it which should make one think. And this goes right the way through to happiness, which is the result that arises to a greater or lesser extent from all the training and discipline done by other people. But if one has not yet experienced this in one's own heart, one will not yet appreciate that there is anything special about it which should make one think and wonder greatly. Even if one has the belief that these things can truly be as others describe them, it still doesn't reach one's heart. But when the time comes that one has actually experienced these things oneself, both the causes, which means the training and disciplining of oneself in various ways, and the acceptance of the ensuing sufferings and discomforts of many kinds, and also the results, which means the happiness of heart which one derives from the various forms of training, from the lowest to the highest levels, then one will see for oneself that it is something special which makes one think much of it. In fact, one may say that it makes one appreciate it from the full depth of one's heart, as well as making one see in the fullness of one's heart just how baneful is the state of dukkha. Then one will see full well the value which has come from those causes which one has enacted, and all doubts of all kinds will disappear without any more need to go and ask anyone else, because the answers have all become obvious to oneself, both in connection with good, evil, happiness, and suffering, which all arise from oneself alone. The Lord Buddha, whose metta brought the greatest blessings to the world, intended that people and other beings should practice and realize or experience things for themselves. He did not want them to accept his words in the manner of someone who brings exciting news just for us to listen to, even though it is true. So the practice of Dhamma at each and every level, as it becomes appropriate to each one, should be a matter of knowing and seeing, and he wanted this to be experienced by each one for himself in his own heart. This is far better than hearing and gaining knowledge from other people, which one has not actually met and attained for oneself. For it was the aim of the Lord to get each one to do the work for himself, to know for himself, and to see for himself, so that it may be truly his own possession and treasure. Then nobody, however bold or daring, will be able to take any part of it away from him, nor make him lose any of it. It was the intention of the Lord that one who practices should go into the forest by himself. Even if he meets up with wild animals like tigers, he should do so himself, and when he meets a tiger he should know for himself how much fear he has. In evading and curing it in various ways, the methods he uses should be his own methods, derived from his own skill in mindfulness and wisdom. The heart which he trains and disciplines to stand up to such incidents should be his own heart, and the ease of body and peace of heart which he gets from the training and discipline should be the value which is in his own heart. This is far better than having the good news of the value of someone else. The heart, the citta, is what penetrates the path and fruition at all its levels, because of this training and discipline. So let it be your own heart that breaks through. In gaining freedom from dukkha of the heart, let it be your own heart that gains freedom, rather than hearing about someone else attaining freedom due to their own efforts. It is also right that our religion should be the special wealth of those who are interested to promote and guard it. Normally, this religion is the general wealth of all those who have interest in practicing and looking after it. but then it turns into your own abundant wealth due to its development to completion in your own heart. We may say that such a person is skilled and clever, using his own mindfulness and wisdom to lead him to bypass the world and samsara and to reach nibbana, thus conforming to the intention of the great teacher to whom the religion belongs, who taught his followers with such insight and ability, with the purpose that those who come to stay in the shade of his supreme perfection should gain skill and cleverness, so that they may penetrate the path and fruition to become Arya Puggala of the highest level and safe, having got rid of all the evil, vile things which had been their enemies for countless lives. When they have attained the level of the master of great learning and wisdom, they will have reached the completion of their learning and training in the Sangha University of Buddhism with full honors, and there is no need for them to go elsewhere for them to learn anything for the remainder of their lives. This is called the complete and perfect learning of the Brahmacharya, and it is nothing but this that the Lord Buddha and all the Savakas learnt to completion in their hearts. They did not learn anything elsewhere but in the heart, because it is the heart alone that, being deluded, leads one into birth and death. So when learning is completed in the heart, all affairs of all kinds come to an end.